Hello and welcome. I'm Carolyn Grimminger with the Public Affairs Forum of the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Austin. Our program's mission is to nourish the mind and spirit and serve social justice. Our forums occur on most Sundays at noon and are free and open to the public. We encourage you to attend. Our church is located at 4700 Grover Avenue in Austin, Texas. For more information about our Public Affairs Forum, you can go to our church website at www.austinuu.org. Today's speaker is Noelle George. She's the Executive Director of Foundation Beyond Belief. Noelle is a secular activist who grew up in Seattle, Washington. She didn't become passionate about secular activism until she moved to Houston, Texas, and was constantly asked the question, where do you go to church? She has worked as a degreed chemical engineer and project manager, but moved to secular activism in 2009. Since then, she has leveraged her previously learned professional skills to help multiple national secular organizations and has also traveled around the country consulting with local groups on the topics of volunteering, leadership, organizational skills, and feminism. In addition to her work at FBB, Noelle is a founder of Mothers Beyond Belief, is on the advisory board of Secular Women, and is on the American Humanist Association LGBTQ Humanist Alliance Advisory Council. Noelle enjoys reading, writing, playing the piano, and rare occasions when she gets a full night's sleep. She currently lives in Houston with her husband and their young daughter. Let's welcome Noelle George.
Hello, everyone. Well, today I'm going to tell you the story of how I came out and then came out again. The first time as a secular person, as an atheist, and the second time as a queer person. As Carolyn said, I grew up in Seattle, and I actually, I'll tell you the story about how I found religion and then left again first. We never really went to church or anything, and I was about 13, and I had a friend at school, someone a little bit older than me who I looked up to, and she said something about Jesus one day. And I said, who's Jesus? We'd never gone to church. We'd never talked about religion, so I thought he was her pen pal in another state or something, and she was horrified, and she said, you don't know Jesus? You have to know Jesus or you're going to go to hell. And I said, oh, what's hell? That sounds bad. And then, so I went home and I talked to my parents and I said, we need to know Jesus or we're going to go to hell. And so, so my parents' response to that was to take us to church. And so we went to a Methodist church. It was a pretty liberal church in Seattle. And I didn't have a lot of friends and I didn't have a very good family life. And so all of a sudden, there were these people saying that they loved me no matter what. They loved me, they wanted to be my friend. And I was like, okay. And so I did the whole deal. I got baptized and I got confirmed and went to church camps and church dances and church retreats and everything. And when I was about, I did that. I met my first boyfriend at a church dance. And when I was about 19, I had graduated high school and I met a group of friends. And I had kind of gone through high school with some friends here and there, but not really a group of friends that I identified with. And it so happened that I met this group, and a couple of them were lesbians. And I had never met a lesbian before. This was around the time that Ellen had come out. So I know I'm dating myself a little bit here, but around the time that Ellen had come out. And so it was a big deal to meet a lesbian, and I didn't, I was kind of fascinated by them, and asked a lot of questions and figured out that I was bisexual because I had attractions to women. So, but I had already had a boyfriend, so of course, I couldn't be a lesbian. I had to be bisexual. So, so I came out as bisexual, and what happened was my church friends who loved me and accepted me no matter what didn't so much anymore. And so I left, and I had already kind of questioned and thought, at a couple times, this seems a little off for me. Something doesn't quite feel right, but I didn't know what it was. And so when I came out as bisexual, I kind of really started questioning and thinking, is this working for me? Do I really believe this? And the answer was no, I didn't really believe it. I just kind of went along because I valued that community and that sense of belonging. And when it talked about some of the things that the Bible talks about, it just didn't make sense to me. And so, and I needed it to make sense in my mind. And so I left religion and I started calling myself an atheist. But I didn't really do anything with that. I didn't really do anything with my atheism. I went to college. I got my chemical engineering degree, and I hung out with friends and worked and did all that, but I didn't really think that much about my atheism. And then I moved to Texas, and yeah. As it said in my bio, I was constantly asked, where do you go to church? Houston's a really big place, and it's hard to meet people in Houston. A lot of people come from different areas to live in Houston, and I had a lot of trouble finding my people. And so I went to like a Democratic, meetup, and I went to a couple different things, and then I went to an atheist meetup. And I was like, hey, here you are, you're my people. And so I, started going to these atheist meetups, and we would always kind of go to the meetup and then talk. And there would be a lot of talk about God and how there wasn't a God, and, about, religion and people leaving religion, and it was a lot of talk. And I'm not really a talker. Like, I like to talk, obviously, since I'm up here talking to you, but I'm more of a doer. And it was 2009, and there was a view of atheists at the time that was like, not very positive. Not that it's much better now, but I think it is better. But it was really negative back then. And I thought, we're not doing anything. We're just sitting around, venting about religion. We're not doing anything to help the community. And so I started a charity, a 501c3 in Texas called the Secular Center. And it was designed to promote volunteering in the local community in Houston for non-believers. And the idea was that we would get out there in our community and we would show people that we were caring about our community and that we were taking action to improve our community. And I thought, if people see us out there doing good things, maybe they're going to be more inclined to listen to our worldview and value our worldview. And so I did that for a little while, and I volunteered for another atheist organization for a little while and traveled around talking to local groups. And I was still working at this large energy company that I had come to Houston to work for. And I spent a lot of time out in the field, which is rural Texas, which is quite a change from liberal Seattle. I really wasn't happy at the big oil company. I kind of felt like a cog in the wheel, and there was a manager that kind of gave me a hard time, and I thought, if I go to a smaller company, it will be better. So I went to a smaller company, and it wasn't better. And so then I got pregnant, and I decided to leave. I was really sick. I had really bad morning sickness, and so I left the smaller energy company and had my baby, and was trying to do the Secular Center at the same time, and was approached about Dale McGowan, who founded Foundation Beyond Belief, the organization that I work for now. He wanted to start a volunteering program, and he wanted to get some ideas about what had worked and what hadn't worked. And the position that I was in at the time, I was like, I can't have this little baby and be running the secular center at the same time. So I decided to merge the secular center into Foundation Beyond Belief, and transferred everything over and started working at Foundation Beyond Belief, and have held various different roles there until I've become the executive director recently. So that's kind of how I got into atheist activism, but there's more coming out to be done. After my daughter was about 2, my husband got an offer to go to Korea with his company. And so he got a temporary assignment there, and we moved to Korea. And while we were in Korea, he worked a lot, and I was still working at Foundation Beyond Belief a little bit, but I had a lot of time on my hands, and I had a lot of time at home. And one day it was Valentine's Day actually. I think I was 36, and I started thinking that I might be a lesbian. And, here I am married in a foreign country with a young child, thinking that I might be a lesbian, and I freaked out. I cried for like an hour, and I didn't know what to do. And so I talked to my aunt, who would be nothing but supportive, I knew, and I said, I think I might be a lesbian, but I'm not sure, and what about my marriage, and what about my daughter, and I don't know what to do. And she was very comforting, she was very good, and she suggested to go on some websites and look around and find a community. And so I did that. I went to a website called emptyclosets.com, designed to support people who are coming out. And one thing that I did when I was trying to figure all this out is that I separated the things that I was trying to figure out. I said, okay, here's me trying to figure out if I'm a lesbian or not. And here's what I'm going to do about my marriage. And I'm going to separate them. I'm just going to figure out if I'm a lesbian or not. I'm not going to worry about what I'm going to do with my marriage right now, because I was so tied to the idea of I'm going to have to leave my husband that I was too freaked out to figure out if I was a lesbian or not. And that, and being in a foreign country and not having any support and stuff was just too overwhelming. So being an engineer, I thought, how am I going to figure this out? So I designed some experiments. Because I couldn't very well, in a foreign country, go out and do any experimenting in that way, being married and all. And that's not really something that I was comfortable with anyway. So I designed some experiments designed to figure out, a couple different aspects of my sexuality. So one thing I learned on emptyclosets.com is that there are 3 components to sexuality. There's physical attraction, there's sexual attraction, and there's emotional attraction. And for physical attraction, that's, when you look at someone, do you find them pleasing to the eye? Do you like what you see? And so what I did is I went online and I found this list of the most attractive male celebrities and the most attractive female celebrities, the 15 most attractive. And so I looked, at the men, and I found about 3 out of the 15 attractive. And then I looked at the women, and I found about 10 out of the 15 attractive. And I was like, all right, well, that's outside of the statistical, whatever. And so I think that's pretty much set. So I definitely preferred women physically than men. And so then I tried to figure out sexual attraction. And that was really hard to do because in Korea, it's not very diverse. It's kind of a homogeneous population, so there's not a lot of different, there's some, but you can't go out on the street and kind of see a lot of various different body shapes and body styles and clothing styles and like in Korea, couples dress the same, and that's like a thing. If you're in a couple, you dress in the exact same outfit, and that's like a thing, a popular thing to do. So just not a lot of diversity. And so I was doing this research, and I came across a book by Dr. Lisa Diamond, and it's called Sexual Fluidity, Understanding Women's Love and Desire. So I read some of the book and thought about my sexuality, and I'm going to read you, I have it on my phone, I'm going to read you some passages from the book. Before I do that, I'm going to say that sexual attraction has always been pretty confusing to me. I hear about like people seeing someone on the street and thinking like, or I want to do things with them or whatever. I don't want to get too, graphic, but, that's never happened to me. I don't have that. And so I did some research, and I figured out that there's a term for that, and it's called demisexual. And it means that you don't experience that sexual attraction until you really know somebody. Like, you don't really feel like you want to do sexual things with someone until you really have some kind of emotional connection with them, or you really get to know them. And a lot of women actually have that tendency, I think. Not all women, but it's pretty common. We just don't really have a name for it. So once I really thought about it, I thought, I've never felt that way about someone that I just met. So I figured that I was demisexual. And so, I started going to counseling, and my counselor had recommended this book by Dr. Lisa Diamond. Dr. Lisa Diamond says that researchers recruit participants for their studies based on self-identification, and that bisexuality and women's sexuality have been woefully understudied. Since 1990, roughly twice as many articles have appeared on male sexual orientation as on female sexual orientation. And she also says that it appears researchers shifted their emphasis to men because the findings for men were so much more consistent and promising than the findings for both sexes considered together. Basically, women were more inconsistent, so they disregarded them in favor of men. So what is sexual fluidity? According to the book, it can be seen as a component of female sexuality that operates in concert with sexual orientation to shape women's sexual desires. Thus, the notion of female sexual fluidity suggests that not that women possess no generalized sexual predispositions, but that these predispositions will prove less of a constraint on their desires and behaviors than is the case for men. So, what that means is that women have sexual desires, but are more easily able to operate outside those sexual desires or shift those sexual desires based on the circumstances or based on, shifting desires of their own. And as a result, it might be impossible to determine whether in a particular instance a woman's desires or behaviors are more attributable to dispositional or situational factors. So when I first read this, I was like, but what about the nature versus nurture argument? I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but a lot of people who are anti-homosexuality insist that sexualities other than straight are a lifestyle and that they can be changed. So when it talks about fluidity and sexuality changing, it's like, okay, so are you saying that it can be changed? And there are actual attempts by homophobic groups to train people into becoming straight, which are highly controversial and totally ineffective. It's the nature versus nurture argument that sexuality is a choice. And Dr. Diamond, in her book, addresses this with a Q&A in the intro. Does sexual fluidity mean that sexual orientation can be changed? No, it simply means that a woman's sexual orientation is not the only factor in determining her attractions. A predominantly heterosexual woman might at some point in time become attracted to a woman. just as a predominantly lesbian woman may at some point become attracted to a man. So this was clear as mud to me in terms of my own sexuality. Despite these experiences, the woman's overall orientation remains the same. And another question is, does fluidity mean that sexual orientation is a choice? No, even when women undergo significant shifts in their patterns of erotic response, they typically report that such changes are unexpected and beyond their control. In some cases, they actively resist these changes to no avail. Another really interesting thing about the book that helped me was that Dr. Diamond said that even adult women have difficulty in sensing the changes in their state of sexual arousal, and that there are powerful cultural norms telling women that a lack of interest in sex is normal and natural. Girls learn from an early age that only slutty women want a lot of sex, whereas good girls are supposed to serve as gatekeepers for men's uncontrollable desires. So these messages inevitably shape girls' understanding of their sexuality and lead them to discount their own experiences of sexual arousal. This might be why adult women are often totally unaware of changes in their own physiological states of sexual arousal, and why low sexual desire is the single most common form of sexual dysfunction in American women. So I thought that was really interesting. So as I was reading this book and reading the Empty Closet's website and learning that demisexual is what fit me best, I actually, I considered asexual. Demisexual is on the spectrum of asexuality, and if you don't know what asexuality is, it's not having a sexual desire at all. And I knew that wasn't me because I've felt sexual desire before, but it's just after I really get to know someone and feel an emotional connection to them. So when I figured out that I was demisexual, I felt like a really big piece of the puzzle had fallen into place, because I always wondered, people would post these pictures of shirtless firemen on the, internet or whatever, and I'd be like, there's nothing there. What's the big deal? It's not like, it's nothing exciting there. And so I just didn't get it. And so it really helped me to figure out what was going on with me. And so what does this mean for my sexuality? If the primary way that people figure out their sexuality is by who they're sexually attracted to, then what does that mean if you're demisexual? How do you figure out your sexuality? You have to look at the other components of your sexuality, the physical attraction and the emotional attraction. I've already figured out the physical attraction. And so then I set about trying to figure out the emotional attraction piece. And the way that I did that was I went and looked at past relationships and thought about them and thought about my emotional connection with men versus women, because I had had a few relationships with women, and really looked at what they were like. And so I won't get into that a super lot, but when I got my first boyfriend, I met him when I was 16, and I met him at a church dance, because I was going to church at the time, the Methodist church, and he was interested in me, and I was really excited that someone was interested in me, and I never thought about whether I was interested in him. I just was so excited that he was interested in me. And so he took me out to the car, and he had a gun in the glove box, which, I'm not really a fan of guns, and that should have been a red flag, but he showed me this gun and said, he had this gun and whatever. And that pretty much set the course for our relationship. Like, he was not really the type of person that I wanted to be associated with, but he liked me, so who cares, So I dated him through high school, and never really had much of an emotional connection with him. Just kind of, I think it was, I was lonely, and I just wanted somebody, who was interested in me. And so later, once I broke up with him, and then met the group of friends that I talked about earlier, with the lesbians, then I dated one of the girls in that group, and that was when I had started calling myself bisexual. And it was a very tumultuous, emotional relationship. Like, it was exhausting. There was a lot of emotion, there was a lot of emotional connection, but it was also kind of a teenage relationship with a lot of drama and, a lot of difficulties and challenges. And, when I came out to my parents as bisexual, they said, my mom said, "What, you're never going to get married? You're never going to have kids?" And that was the thing back then. Like, if you were gay, or lesbian, you didn't get married. Nobody could conceive of being allowed to be married at the time, and having kids. And that was the stereotype, I guess. And so it wasn't the best coming out. And she came around eventually, but she was raised in the era that you knew there were gay people, but they didn't really make a big deal of it. They weren't really out. Like, they were gay, but they didn't really talk about it or whatever. And so her concerns were mostly around safety and how out are you going to be? Like, are you going to be out there, or are you going to keep it to yourself, kind of? And so she did come around eventually, but it was an interesting relationship. It didn't last very long, the relationship with the girl. And then I went back to dating men because men were easier. They don't cause a lot of emotional drama. It was just, I think, I never really thought, because I had already had a boyfriend, I never really thought that I could be a lesbian because I was already with a guy, because you didn't think that at the time. Like, your sexuality was defined by who you were with, not who you were attracted to, but who you were with. And I had already been with a guy, and so that ruled out lesbianism for me. And so, I had another relationship with a man, a little bit, I was about 21, and it was a very passionate relationship. And so, I thought, after I was with him, I thought, well, you can't be a lesbian because you've had this, this good, emotional, passionate relationship with a man. So, I didn't think, well, it could be an anomaly. I just thought, well, here's why you can't. So, as I dated around, through my 20s and stuff, but then after I moved to Houston, I dated another woman, and she was younger than me, and she was very, she was used to getting her way, because, like, if I was working and she was in college, and if I wouldn't answer the phone or whatever, she would come over to my house and knock on the door and say, "Why aren't you answering your phone? I wanted to talk to you." And so it was not a very healthy relationship, and it kind of, I was trying to be stable with my engineering job and working for the big company, and she just wanted to, spend time together and stuff. And so that was challenging, and it didn't last very long because she was too kind of demanding for me. Like, I wanted something a little more, a little less, like, overwhelming, I guess, because she just wanted to spend all this time together, and I had to work and, do things, and I wanted more balance. And so, and this is still me thinking back on past relationships, and there was a lot of emotional connection with her, but not a lot of stability or balance. And so then I met my husband after I dated her, and he was really mellow and not very demanding, and that was nice. And what happened is that a friend of mine who was dating his roommate, she thought that because she was happy and in a couple, everybody should be happy and in a couple, so she started working on us to start dating. And she would say to me, like, "Hey, what do you think about Keith? He's a pretty nice guy." And she would say to him, "Hey, what do you think about Noelle? She's pretty cute." And so, so she worked on us for a while before he said that he was interested in me. And he picked a really awful time because I had a friend who died in a car accident, a coworker and a friend, and his name was Daniel. And I had seen him. He had left the bar where we were all at. I was there with Keith and a bunch of other friends, and he had left the bar. And then the guy that was driving was drunk, and he ran into a pole, and Daniel died. And so I was really kind of traumatized by that because we were all there at the same bar, and I didn't realize that the guy. It was just too, I didn't do anything. What if I had said something different? What if I, that kind of thing. And so he picked that weekend, and he said, "Hey, I'm interested in you," and I was kind of in shock. And so I said, "Okay, well, we should probably hang out just us and see if we can get along," because we were always only just with friends. So we started doing that, and I was pretty, blasé about it at first, I guess, or not really giving him a fair shot. And then we all went camping with our group of friends, and I had to come back for Daniel's funeral. And I had to come back early, and he got up early on Sunday with me and packed up everything and drove back with me to Houston and unpacked the car while I got ready to go on the airplane to the funeral. And I thought, this is a nice guy, so I should give him a shot. And so I did. And then, and we got married and stuff. And I don't think I ever really committed. I always kind of had one foot out the door, like, he's a nice guy, but I don't know, And so that was kind of, my analysis of the relationships. Like, it was always these really dramatic, intense relationships with women that were, I was really emotionally connected with, and then these, like, mellow relationships with guys. And, except for that one guy that I had been with around the time that I was 21, who, I did have a real strong connection with. I was always kind of like, yeah, we can date, and then I was like, yeah, I don't really want to date anymore. And, it wasn't any skin off my back. And so, I wavered back and forth a lot between, am I bisexual or am I a lesbian? And, doing all these experiments and trying to figure things out. And I still felt a little bit like if I was a lesbian, I would have to leave my husband. I was trying to separate it, but it wasn't easy. And so what I did was I looked at the Kinsey scale. Who's heard of the Kinsey scale? Some. Okay. The Kinsey scale is a scale of sexuality. And on the 0 side, it's straight, like 0 and 1 is straight. And then 5 and 6 is gay or lesbian, and in the middle is bisexual. And so I looked at each of the levels, the numbers, and I finally settled on the fact that, I wasn't a 6. I wasn't like lesbian, but I was a 5. And a 5 is that you lean toward women, but you have incidental attractions to men. So I kind of classified that, that one relationship with that guy as an incidental, an anomaly rather than the norm, and kind of move forward that way. And it took me a long time to get to that point. I did a lot of wavering back and forth, and I had told my husband pretty early on that I was having this crisis. I didn't tell him right away, but I think I first had the thought, I think, on Valentine's Day, and then I told him in April. So it wasn't right away, but it was pretty early. This whole process took several years of going to counseling and research and things like that. So he kind of knew along the way that I was dealing with this, and it wasn't easy, especially being in a foreign country and dealing with it. But I eventually decided that I was a Kinsey 5, and I decided that I would stay married. And when I've told this story before, I've asked, who wants to know about the husband, and people have been really curious what happened with the husband. But we're still married, and we actually had decided to open our relationship up. So, because I had these more attractions to women. When I decided to stay married, we decided that, I could see women. And so, he could see women if he wants, but he doesn't really seem to want to do that. So we decided to open our relationship up. And so that helped because I felt like I wasn't, missing out on this whole aspect of my personality. And then once I had the ability to be able to see women if I wanted, it wasn't such a big deal anymore. My husband knows me really well. He knows if he says no, that I'm going to want it that much more. But if he's open to it, then I'm going to kind of move at my own pace, and my pace is pretty slow. So I did go on OkCupid and talk to a few women, but haven't really. Nothing's really come of it, and I've not really felt a great desire to explore that. I think I have a young daughter. She's 5, and I have a pretty busy life, and just knowing that the options available is okay with me right now. And the demisexual part of me really wants to get to know someone first, and I don't just want to go out there and have a bunch of sex. So it's kind of kept me from really exploring that part, but I feel good knowing that I have the option. So that's kind of the story. I guess we could do questions now.
Okay, so now we're going to have time for question and answer. Like I said, keep your question brief and to the point, so everybody will have a chance to ask a question.
Thank you.
My question to you, you said that there are twice as many studies on men's sexuality as women's. Did I remember that right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you could ask a question and design a study on women's sexuality, what would you do?
Wow, that's a great question. I've never really thought about that, but I think, Dr. Diamond has done some good studies on women's sexuality and fluidity. I think that I would probably study something around desire and how we identify desire, because like Dr. Diamond has said, a lot of adult women don't recognize when they feel desire, sexual desire, and so I would do something around helping women realize more when they're experiencing sexual desire and identifying that and not kind of shaming it down, but letting it out. So that's probably what I'd do.
This is kind of a self-serving question, but, two-part question. Are you still involved in atheist organizations? And is there an awareness, do you think, among atheists, how welcoming, let's say, a Unitarian church might be to them?
That's a good question. Yeah, I'm really involved in the organization that I work for now is Foundation Beyond Belief. It's a humanist charity, and we do different things like volunteering. We're a nationwide organization, and we do different things like volunteering, and we do overseas service in Ghana, and we collect monthly donations from people and then give grants to charities and things like that. And I'm the executive director, and Claire's on the board. And I was just earlier in January at a meeting of all the secular leaders around the country, and so I'm very involved in that. And, I think the perception of Unitarian churches with atheists is that one thing that I've heard is that people go to one and they think all the Unitarian churches are like that one. And that's not been my experience, and that's not been a lot of people's experience, but it's kind of like going to a counselor. Sometimes you have to go to a couple different ones to find the right fit. And, with Unitarian churches, I think it can be the same way, but a lot of times people might not have an option where they live of going to a couple of different ones. There might just be the one. I think families are more likely to go to Unitarian churches. Like, I've gone to the one in Houston with my daughter, and they have such a great family program and such great activities for kids as they grow up. It's really somewhere that I'm comfortable having her be. But, some atheists are not comfortable with anything even remotely resembling religion. They don't want to go to a service. They don't want to, sing songs. They don't want to do any of that. And, Or some atheists, they want to eradicate religion, That's a very small percentage, but I think a lot of times the image of all atheists is like those atheists. And the large majority of atheists, like my husband's Catholic. He says he's Catholic, and when he says that he believes sometimes. So he's kind of a non-practicing apacatholic, I call him, apathetic Catholic. And so, a lot of atheists don't want to eradicate religion, I think they just don't know what the Unitarian churches have to offer.
I heard one saying that if you've been to one Unitarian church, you've been to one Unitarian church. Okay, we have a question.
I might just come up with a lot of keywords you could put into Google. The first word is polyandry. The second word is, the name of your organization suggests that you would be interested in the idea that, like, this country is, how do you say, ethnocentric with respect to marriage, i.e. there's no polyandry in the United States. And for me, polyandry is an important idea because, in a sense, I kind of begins to define my own sexuality a bit, which it has a name that nobody even has heard of, and it sounds like a medical diagnosis. And so I'll tell you what it is. It's autogynephilia. So, and the counterpart is, okay, the idea is beyond belief. Does your organization encompass any kind of this kind of thinking?
Well, we call ourselves a humanist organization, so we believe that we should all take care of each other. We believe that, we believe in compassionate action in the world. And our mission is to unite humanists in charitable efforts and to advocate for compassionate action throughout the world. So that's pretty much what we believe.
Yes, you alluded to the fact that y'all have these activities with Foundation Beyond Belief. But what are some of the specific types of things or specific activities that you try to get the people involved in?
It depends. We have one of our programs is called the Beyond Belief Network. And we have over 100 local groups around the country that do different types of activities. So we don't, we try to respect the fact that everyone's different. And so the groups do what activities they want. Like they'll do food drives, they'll do roadside cleanups or park cleanups, they'll do, serving a meal at a homeless shelter, they'll do toiletry drives, like the Atheists Helping the Homeless here in Austin. And so it's really what the groups want to do. And then, we take a report on what they did and we count up the hours. Like all of our groups have done over 100,000 hours of community service. And so we tally up the hours and then we give grants to the groups depending on how many service activities they have. So like if they do 8 activities, they get a $250 grant. If they do 12, they get a $500 grant, and then they compete for prizes and stuff like that too. So it really varies. I mean, one group has worked at a museum, a science museum in Springfield, Missouri, and they just do all sorts of different things.
I kind of have a follow-up question to Luther, so I don't really know how to phrase this. What benefits do you think Foundation Beyond Belief would have over organization that espoused more religious principles or more religious beliefs or maybe even conditions?
I mean, we're definitely a humanist organization, but we don't, and we support secular charities. So I think a lot of different people could get on board with that kind of idea. Like you don't have to subscribe to a specific dogma or whatever. Definitely most of our members and supporters are secular, like not religious, but I wouldn't say that all of them are. We do have a program, one of our charity categories is called Challenge the Gap, and it's for a religiously identified charity that doesn't proselytize and works for the greater good. So we recognize that, religion isn't all bad and that they do good things, and we try to support that where necessary. So, or where we can.
Thank
Don't
you for
worry
answering
about-
my question.
Huh?
Did you have another comment to make?
Yeah, I was just going to say, don't worry about if something's too personal. If you ask it and it's too personal, I'll just tell you if it's too personal. So don't worry about that.
We have a question from Becky Halpin.
So this has all been really interesting and great. And so what kind of reaction do you get from people when you go out to volunteer? Like, you're usually volunteering with other groups, or often you are. So what kind of reaction do you get as a group of atheists out volunteering in the world? Or what kind of questions do you get?
It really varies. When I was running the secular center, I once tried to set up something at a nursing home, and the lady said, "Who are you?" And I said, "Oh, we're just a bunch of secular people who, we're atheists, and we want to come and play games with the residents and talk to them and stuff." And she said, "Well, there are no atheists here, so we don't need you to come." And I was like, "Well, we're not going to talk to them about religion. We just want to, visit and stuff." And she was like, "No, I don't think so." And so it's varied all the way from that to complete joy that we're there. We have a program that works on disasters after a disaster, and there are two components to the program. There's a drive part, which is collecting money for the disaster, and then there's the teams part, which is sending volunteers out to rebuild after a disaster. And one of the things that we tell our teams is that we're not there to get into a discussion about religion. We're not going to hide who we are, but we're not going to debate either. And that's kind of our policy. So when they were deployed in South Carolina, there was a person who kept trying to kind of, well, what do you believe? What do you believe? And, we kind of just said, we're not here to talk about religion. We just want to work. And so I think it's an important balance. And especially if you're out there helping someone who's been, lost their home or whatever, you're there for them. So you want to respect their beliefs, and if they ask you to pray with them or whatever, whatever, you're there for them and you're there to support them. And if people are uncomfortable with that, then it's probably not a great fit for them to be on the team. That being said, we want the people who are on the team to be comfortable. And so it's a really delicate balance. But we have had people try to engage us in debate and have had to say, sorry, I'm not going to debate with you. So,
If you'll stand up and introduce yourself and ask your question.
My name is Alicia, and I just, I wanted to ask, of the two things that you believe, or that you are, you're very courageous, obviously, and very honest. And I wonder how much pushback what the response is in your personal and professional life when you disclose that you are an atheist, or when you disclose that your sexual orientation is not what most people might expect. And also, do you feel that, say, gay men have a similar response, or do you feel that the response that a woman gets is different?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. When I identified as bisexual, I wouldn't tell men, because the reaction was, "Woo, threesome," That was a lot of times the reaction. And that's not my style, and that, the demisexual thing again, it's never really been my style, and so I wouldn't tell them, I just wouldn't say anything. So, yes, the reaction has been different. Women have not said that. I haven't really had negative responses in my professional life. I actually, when I was working at the big energy company, I got invited to be on a board for a school, like a technical school that was being put on every year. And they started the school every year with a prayer. A minister would get up there and he would start the school with a prayer. And, I said, like, could you say maybe, something more inclusive? Like, I didn't want them to not do the prayer, that wasn't really my aim, but I kind of wanted to be included in feel included in the moment or whatever, like a moment, can we do a moment of silence and then a prayer or something like that, And they were very nice about it. I think that it helps that I'm kind of I would say like a moderate atheist, that I am in a mixed marriage, if you would, and, that my husband, says that he believes sometimes, and that's fine with me. Like, we've never tried to convince each other, of our own points of view. We're perfectly fine to just believe different things. And so I do remember going out into the field in rural Texas, and the thing that I got more than anything was, you came down here all by yourself? And they were shocked that I'd come without parents or a husband. And that was and there was a lot of things like that happened. But, or being hit on, or either, there's 3 reactions that you get. One is you get coddled because you're a woman and you're dainty and you can't, handle the things that men do. One is that you get treated the same, which is nice. And one is that you get treated worse, which is like you can't do things because you're a woman, you're not smart, and you can't figure this out, I'm gonna have to do this for you, or you have nothing to tell me that I don't already know. And those were the reactions. So I got more of that than anything about, usually I would say I'm not religious or whatever, and I wouldn't say like I'm an atheist, because back then that word was too inflammatory. So I wouldn't say that at work. I would say I don't go to church, or I'm not religious. So now I say I'm an atheist to everyone.
We have another question from Luther Elmore.
This is kind of a follow-up on that, and that is to say that if normally you do not engage people about your atheism, then how do you get the word out about Foundation Beyond Belief and your own beliefs? How do you get the word out, especially when you're doing these activities, to say that atheists are not a bunch of bad people, and that we really have some ethics, we have some morality, but we're just non-theists?
Right. One good example of that is when we were in South Carolina. A group came up to us, and they asked who the leader was, and I was there, and so the lady came up to me, and she said she had this little quilt square, and she said, I just want to let you guys know that we're praying for you, and we want to support you, and we believe that you're doing the Lord's work, and so on and so forth. And they knit these little quilt squares for the volunteers after a disaster, and they hand them out. And I was like, oh, okay, well, no thank you, because I'm an atheist. And, my first reaction was no. And then she said, thank you so much for telling me. We would never want to push our religion on anyone. I really appreciate you being honest, or something like that. And I said, oh, okay, so I will take the quilt square. And then and then when she went around to the rest of the group, she modified her spiel and said, we're thinking of you, we want to support you, and let you know that, that we appreciate what you're doing. And so, the idea when we're out in the field doing disaster recovery is that we say who we are, but we don't get into arguments about it. So we're not going to hide who we are, but we're also not going to, we don't want to be disrespectful to the people that we're trying to help or whatever. And so I think people get the sense, that we're good people just because we're there and because we're saying that we're atheists. Like that group, they could have gone around to the whole place and not seen any atheists and thought, and had their perceptions stay the same. Or, they came to us saw that we were atheists, saw that we were doing good things, and had their perception change.
I feel like we have had two different strands going on. Your personal story, your personal coming out story, and your work with the Foundation Beyond Belief. I'm wondering how the particulars of your coming out have played in queer communities, and also at an institutional level, how you have worked with, to what extent you have worked with LGBT identified organizations.
Yeah. I've definitely tried to support some trans organizations through Foundation Beyond Belief. We have 5 categories of charities that we feature in the Humanist Grants Program: human rights, education, poverty and health, natural world, and then challenge the gap. And in human rights, we feature a lot of different types of organizations. Sometimes they're LGBTQ organizations, and sometimes they're not. So when we do feature a LGBTQ organization, the last couple times it's been a trans organization, Transgender Law Center, and then it's a New York organization that I'm mixing up with something else, so I'm not getting the name in my head. But those organizations have been great organizations, and I've been able to use my connections that I had this need when I figured out that my sexuality was a bigger deal than I thought. Like when I was out as bisexual, it wasn't that big of a deal. It was like I mostly dated men, and it just didn't play a big part in my life. But when I had this kind of new realization and kind of came out again, it was like, and I think part of it was being in Korea and being isolated, but I wanted to find people who were like me. I wanted to find my people again. And so I've reached out more to different LGBTQ organizations and tried to be a little more active in that community, especially being married to a man in a hetero marriage. Like, I don't really get a chance to express that part of myself that much. And so I've been able to use those connections sometimes in my work.
Thank you so much for coming out and giving us a really thought-provoking lecture and Q&A today. Let's all give her a hand.
Thank you.